One of the interesting elements in the X402 protocol architecture is the facilitator role. The facilitator is in charge of bringing transactions on-chain, abstracting the concept of gas and fees for end users and agents. As of today, most of the facilitators are playing this role for free, but this will quickly change as these actors need an economic incentive. You can't pay for transaction fees forever without something in return. While delegating the facilitator role is perfectly fine for some, others may need to be able to have control over this piece of infrastructure. Today we're introducing MoneyMQ's Facilitator as a Service. With this, you can build your application locally with our MoneyMQ CLI and deploy a production-grade facilitator in a few clicks. Our facilitators were made with security in mind. They were built on top of Cora, audited signing infrastructure made by the Solana Foundation. They're written in Rust, so they're blazing fast, and they're built on top of geographically distributed serverless infrastructure, so they are highly available. Here we have an API with an endpoint that we want to restrict so that only paid users can access it. We've configured the endpoint with the standard X402 middleware so that a USDC payment can be sent with the request to access the resource. If we want to test this workflow locally, we can run MoneyMQ sandbox to run a local Solana network and facilitator to pay for all transaction fees. We can set our local EMV file to point to this local facilitator, and we can update our RPC URL to point to the local network. Now, when we access the resource and include payments, we can see the facilitator paying for the end user's transaction fees. So let's start our X402 gated API, and we'll run a script we've made to create a payment and access the paid resource. We can see that we've accessed the protected endpoint successfully. And if we go to our local MoneyMQ dashboard, we can see the facilitator paying for fees. We can see a list of all the transactions, and we can see our payout account receiving funds. When you're ready to deploy a facilitator to production, you can go to the Deploy tab and give your facilitator a subdomain. Then you can give it a name, and later you'll be able to configure the transaction fees collected by your facilitator, the accepted tokens, as well as the signing infrastructure that will be used to sign the facilitator's transactions. Currently, Turnkey is used for all signatures, and USDC is the accepted stablecoin. We can click Deploy, and we'll get one last chance to review our facilitator. We can review the details, click Deploy, and we're all set. Now that we've deployed, we have a production-ready facilitator ready to pay transaction fees, but you still may want to test this in a staging environment, testing on the cloud infrastructure without spending mainnet funds. Your deployed facilitator has a sandbox mode as well. There's a fully functioning facilitator deployed to the sandbox, but it's pointing to an ephemeral surf net where you can airdrop yourself funds. If we want to test this sandbox facilitator with our app, we can just update the environment variables in our X402 server to use this facilitator. We can copy the sandbox endpoint URL and paste it as our facilitator. Then we can copy the sandbox RPC URL and paste that as our network. Now when we run our server and access the protected route, our transaction fees will be paid for by our remote sandbox facilitator. And now we can execute the script that's going to access the protected route. And if we go to our remote sandbox, we can see the facilitator paying for transaction fees, and we can see the transactions that are executed. Finally, once we've tested locally and on the remote sandbox, we can switch our API to receiving real mainnet payments. We can once again update our EMV file to point to the production facilitator and mainnet RPC URL, and we'll need to add some funds to our facilitator account. When we're ready to add funds to our facilitator, we can go to Production Mode, Overview, and click this button to connect your wallet. Now that our facilitator is funded, we're ready to point our API to this facilitator and have it start paying transaction fees. We can restart our API that's now pointing to the mainnet facilitator. And once again, execute that script that's going to spend real funds to access the resources. Now if we go to our Facilitator's dashboard, we can see the fees it's paying, and we can see the list of payments. Here with a few clicks, we've deployed a production-grade facilitator that's ready to abstract away transaction fees and allow your end user to access your product using only stablecoins.